Okay, so Steph, I've titled this video, House Not Selling, Watch This. And I'm hoping lots of people watch this whose house is on the market, but it's not selling, funnily enough. And I particularly wanted to do this video with you because I've just been looking at the system, at the database, and you've just received a £100,000 over asking price offer, which is 10% over asking price. And the really important thing about this is that it's, I think, around 3 months after the property launched to market. Which we talk about anti-stagnation, and lots of agents, I think many agents after 6 to 8 weeks maximum would have been suggesting that client reduce their price. So talk me through, like, just for someone that isn't your client right now, imagine you're having your 8-week review with that client who's on the market at £1 million, where many would suggest a reduction because obviously they're commission hungry, we call it commission breath, but you obviously didn't do that. And you've ended up getting them 100 grand over asking price. And imagine you had dropped it to 900 and got, I'm sure you would have got over asking price deal because you're great, but then you would have maybe got 950, a million, and that would have cost them £100,000. This detail of estate agency is really what I believe separates even the good from the great. Talk me through that.
Well, it was an interesting one because we'd actually received several offers on this property before as well. And they started at 875. So it was 875. I think we got a 950 and we got a million. And they rejected all of them, slightly to my worry for the £1 million rejection, but they were adamant that they wanted more. And I knew from day dot that they wanted more. I knew what they were looking to achieve. And realistically, they did have an offer that was higher than this the year before as well. Having said that, the previous offer they'd had was from someone who couldn't come up with the cash. So it was, as I kept saying, a slightly null and void offer, but nevertheless. So we just kept pushing it. And every week I kept still sending them their stats from Rightmove and Zoopla and showing what the property's doing. But I knew that they were never going to reduce the property. And I think some agents will still just push and push and push regardless. And I just knew it wasn't going to happen with these people. They can't reduce. So we've just got to do everything we possibly can in that case to just sell it for what they want, basically. So we kept pushing, like I say, vendor updates, rotate the photos, keep it fresh, tweak the description on occasion just to make sure that it was all relevant, kept proactively speaking to the database, texting the database, not just emailing, because that can, obviously attract more people. I look at a text a lot more than I look at my emails.
Yeah, I think the world does.
Yeah, exactly. And just being really on it. We did a really good social media video for this one as well. So that helped.
Yes, that was really good.
And so that sort of thing helps.
So you touched on two things there, which if someone's watching this, their house on the market and it isn't selling, which is what I hope they're watching it for, because I'm going to try and optimize the hell out of it for YouTube for that exact search. But regularly analyzing and optimizing the back end performance. Talk about that, because I speak to a lot of clients or a lot of potential clients that have been on the market, and I'll say to them, what's your click-through rate? What's your performance report saying? And they'll be like, what's that?
I think most of the people that I end up taking onto the market, and bear in mind, a lot of our clients are people who haven't sold with another agent. So these clients were on the market last year with somebody else, didn't sell. I would say 80% of the properties I've got on the market at the moment have been on with somebody before us and couldn't sell for one reason or another. And every time I ask them, what's the Rightmove report saying? What's the graph saying? How are you comparing to similar properties like yours? They couldn't answer. They couldn't tell me anything, because the number one thing actually that most people say to me when they leave their agent is not that they necessarily thought, oh, we're not getting loads of viewings or anything like that, but they were getting no communication. So most clients are all right with not having viewings if the communication is there explaining why. I think we don't want random people traipsing around our house if it's not going to come to anything, and we know it's not going to come to anything. But they need to understand the why.
And whilst you were doing these kind of Rightmove reviews on and it's mainly, Rightmove's the biggest one, but you obviously we look at all three of them. We look at Zoopla's, we look at on the markets. Were they looking positive? As in, was it competing well, so you didn't feel like it needed a drastic change?
Yeah, and I think that's what I always look at the most on those reports, is it's all very well and good to look at how you're performing. And some properties will perform really level. Some properties will be really up and down. I've got some where they're all over the place, and you've got no idea from what day to the next it's going to be like. But I will always pay more attention to how they fare against other properties that are competition to them, because you can look at that and you can see how you're comparing. So these guys on an average were performing somewhere between 10 and 15% better than their competition was, which is another reason why we never really pushed the price reduction conversation. Because
Mm.
in my mind, if you're performing better than your competition, price is probably not an issue. If you're performing a lot worse than your competition, and actually that's something whereby you're worrying about it or anything like that, the chances are a big reason for that is the price point.
Yeah, that's
Um,
huge. So I think the massive takeaway from that is let the data lead the decision. And I think not, oh, you haven't sold after 2 weeks, you're going to start stagnating. Well, maybe you're not stagnating. Maybe you actually can still, after 3 months, as you found, are competing very well with the competition, because you're on the market in competition, not in isolation. So just because you've had no viewings, maybe everyone else on the market have had no viewings either. So it's
exactly.
not a problem.
Also, I think it's really important though to remember that actually you've obviously you've got that competition, you've got to keep an eye on it and everything, but realistically you have to ensure that you are comfortable with what levels you're achieving as well. If you are worrying about anything, or you're feeling like, oh, actually I don't know, or you might know a neighbor who's on the market with somebody else, ask the questions. Because like I say, if you're not getting that information from your agent, you should be trying to gather it a little bit yourself to then go to your agent with it and say, what can we do? The other thing that's really, really important is actually, if you are watching that sort of data and everything, you need to make sure that you're keeping your listing fresh. So like I said about just rotating the photos and things, if you're sat on the market and your photos have never changed in terms of the front shot and the lead shot in that whole 3 months, buyers are going to keep seeing the same thing. If you
Yeah.
just keep changing it, not even necessarily every week, every other week, just so that actually it's a different lead photo that buyers are seeing, it keeps it fresher. And some people will then maybe slightly get tricked into thinking that you've not been on the market as long as you have.
I'm massive on this, and I think weekly potentially at the moment is too regular, because you can't analyze the data in 7 days in what is become a slower market. It's not a poor market, it's certainly a bit of a slower market. But I generally believe if you're scrolling through Rightmove as you do, that's why we invest so much money and time in pro photography and premium and featured and all this kind of stuff. But you're scrolling through and you see a house that looks pretty ugly from the outside, and you keep scrolling because you're like, oh, I'm not sure on that. You scroll again next week and it's got a picture of the back of the house looking back on a huge ground floor extension showing a massive bifold kitchen. And I've always said to people, it amazes me. I don't think any house actually should be advertised with an external shot as the main image. I think it should definitely be picture number 2 or 3. Don't hide it. But because you don't live in the house, people make an emotional decision about buying a house. You don't live in your front garden and look at your house. So that's not the thing that it's going to get someone kind of looking at it thinking, oh, I quite like the look of that. I'll go and view it. Something else really interesting. Not you probably haven't. I assume not, but you may not have checked this. But with houses on market for 2, 3, 4 months, and I've had clients on the market for 9, 10 months, 12 months, and sold the house. I don't know why I say months with a P, months. But the guy that you've just potentially going to be agreeing this property sale to, it is a complete cash purchase as well. He's been on our buyer database since May. So, but he couldn't view it because he's been abroad. So then he comes to the UK and he views it and he likes it and he offers on it. So a lot of the time, just because your house been on the market for kind of 2, 3, 4 months, there might be people watching it, just can't get to it to look at it. I had another situation recently. I got more inquiries when I withdrew the property from the market than I got while it was on the market. So I withdrew it, and I got all these calls to be like, "What's happened with that place?" I was keeping an eye on it. That was very interesting. So there's always people that are going to favourite your property. They're going to keep an eye on it. They might think, "Oh, it's a bit out of budget. Maybe I'll see if it'll get reduced."
There's a lot of people who are on the market themselves and so can't
Yeah,
necessarily make an offer straight away.
very
You've got
good
to
point.
remember that we will always say there's that ripple effect in the market, won't we? Like, ultimately the busier it gets at the lower end, the busier it gets up the chain, and again and again. So realistically, there will be people who've been sat on the market themselves, have loved your house since the second it came onto the market, but not everyone wants to be actively viewing, even if they're not under offer, because they don't want to see a house that they might fall in love with and then could lose.
Yeah.
So you've got to bear in mind that sometimes those people might take a few months to sell, and that might be the thing that triggers yours to then sell.
Love that. Yeah, I totally forgot about that whole piece around it. And there are loads of buyers that I've spoken to who said, look, I just don't want to view it because I know I'm going to fall in love with it and I don't want to be tortured for the next couple of months while my house is waiting to sell. So
Yeah.
obviously we take theirs on the market for them and sell it for them so they can move. But great bit of advice. That was a really good 11 minutes of advice. So if you're stuck for sale on the market, you've been on for a few months, 3 months, maybe your agent is pressurizing you for a price reduction. The general advice from this piece of advice from Steph and I is only do it potentially once you've looked at the data. And if your house isn't competing very well with that overall market, maybe it is needed. If your performance is still on par with everything else, it's probably not needed. Thank you, Steph.
Thank you.